Did you know that the Vice President of the United States just publicly called his own administration's actions a mistake? That's not a rumor. That's a direct quote from J.D. Vance, and it's already being called the biggest betrayal in modern U.S. politics. This isn't just a political disagreement, this is a silent coup playing out in front of our eyes. And yes, it's real. Just 24 hours after federal agents stormed a Texas church in a failed ICE raid, tear gassing children in the basement, J.D. Vance, Trump's own vice president, broke ranks on tape. He called the raid an operational failure. He said the current strategy is a suicide pact. And here's the most chilling part. He said, I am stepping in. Not the president asked me, not we're working together, just I am stepping in. That one sentence may have just ended the Trump presidency. In the last 12 hours, we've seen leaked audio, market movements, emergency meetings, and rising panic inside the White House. Trump is isolated, the donors are furious, and the base is cracking in half. So what is really happening behind the scenes? Why did J.D. Vance turn on the man who made him vice president? Who leaked the tapes? Why did the markets rally after the betrayal? And is the 25th Amendment, the one that removes a sitting president, actually on the table? This isn't fiction. This isn't a headline. This is the beginning of the end. And you're about to see all 10 reasons why. Strap in, because once you hear what Vance said behind closed doors, you'll realize the power in Washington just shifted, and Trump might not survive it. When a sitting vice president calls the administration's most controversial action a mistake, it's not just criticism, it's open rebellion. Let's break it down. For 5 years, J.D. Vance played the part of the loyal soldier. He defended Trump's most extreme policies, smoothed over the rough edges for the donors, and stayed quiet, even when things got chaotic. But all of that ended the moment he stood in front of GOP megadonors in Ohio and said the unthinkable. The raid in Dallas was an operational failure of the highest order. Let that sink in. Vance didn't say, "We regret how it turned out." He didn't use spin. He used the one word that's forbidden in Trump's orbit: mistake. In the MAGA world, admitting fault is a cardinal sin. Loyalty is expected to be absolute. And yet, here's the vice president on tape calling out the administration's tactics as reckless and signaling that he, not Trump, is now taking the lead. If the current strategy is a suicide pact, I'm not signing it. That line alone changed everything. It wasn't just a comment, it was a challenge, a warning shot. Vance was telling the most powerful people in the Republican Party that he's no longer following orders, he's giving them. And it worked. Within hours, the leaked audio was splashed across Politico and the New York Times. Donors started making calls, markets started reacting, and inside the White House, Trump was reportedly furious, calling Vance a snake and a traitor. But here's the kicker: Trump can't fire him. Vance isn't a staffer. He's not an advisor. He's an elected official, protected by the Constitution. And now he's using that protection to distance himself from the chaos while building his own image as the adult in the room. This wasn't an accidental leak. This was a calculated move, and the message is clear: I'm not covering for you anymore. When your own vice president goes off script and says what the rest of the country is thinking, that's not damage control. That's mutiny, and it's only the beginning. If this video made you think, tell us in the comments. Your insights help shape what we cover next. We put real time and research into every episode, so hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, but it keeps this channel alive. Here's a truth most people don't want to admit. Politics doesn't run on speeches. It runs on money. And when the money starts panicking, the entire system shakes. That Ohio family time trip, it wasn't family time. It was a closed-door emergency meeting with Republican megadonors, the kind of people who don't just write checks. They decide who survives in politics. These are the super PAC kings, the energy tycoons, the tech billionaires, the manufacturing giants, the people who can quietly stop funding you and leave you politically bleeding out in weeks. And right now, they're terrified. Why? Because donors don't care about loyalty the way voters do. Donors care about stability. They care about predictability. They care about one thing above all else, not losing money. And from their perspective, Trump has become a walking financial fire alarm. Supply chains disrupted, markets shaking, boycotts spreading, global backlash growing. And then the worst kind of headline: federal agents storming a church and tear gassing kids. That's not just morally explosive, like it's brand poison. Companies lose customers, employees revolt, investors get spooked, and suddenly the donors are the ones paying the price. So they demanded answers. And that's why Vance's words were so important. When he told them the raid was a mistake and an operational failure, he wasn't just criticizing policy, he was doing something far more dangerous. He was giving the donors permission to emotionally and financially detach from Trump. Then came the line that changes everything: if the current strategy is a suicide pact, I'm not signing it. Translation: don't follow him off the cliff, follow me. This is why donor revolts matter more than Twitter wars. When donors stop believing in a leader, they start funding a replacement, quietly at first, and then all at once. And here's the scary part: once the donor class chooses a new center of gravity, the party follows. Because in modern politics, money isn't just support, money is oxygen. And if Trump loses the donor oxygen, he doesn't just lose an election, he loses control. That's when a presidency starts collapsing from the inside. Here's a detail most people missed, but it might be the clearest sign yet that Trump's time is running out. Just hours after JD Vance's leaked comments hit the headlines, the stock market rallied. That's right. While the White House was scrambling to do damage control, Wall Street gave its verdict, and it wasn't subtle. Now you might think, what do the markets have to do with politics? Everything. Markets thrive on confidence, on clarity, on the belief that someone, somewhere, knows what they're doing. And over the last 6 months, investors have been watching the Trump administration spiral into chaos, from the Davos disaster to the Japan bond crash to the now infamous Dallas church raid. Every new headline sent the markets into uncertainty. But Vance's bold break from Trump? That was different. Suddenly, investors saw a grown-up in the room, someone who used words like review protocols and stop the bleeding, someone who sounded less like a fire starter and more like a crisis manager. And the markets responded, even if just slightly, with green candles. That's more than a bounce. It's a signal. In a world where investors move billions based on confidence, JD Vance just became the safer bet. Think about that. The sitting president is being outscored by his vice president, in real time by the algorithms that run the global economy. It gets even more dangerous for Trump when you realize this. Wall Street doesn't care about personal loyalty. It follows whoever protects the bottom line. And right now, Trump looks like a risk. Vance looks like a reset. Remember, in 2008, markets collapsed when confidence vanished. In 2026, confidence is shifting. Not away from America, but away from Trump. And when the people who write the checks, move the money, and control the capital start rooting for your replacement, that's not just bad optics. That's the beginning of the end. Because when Wall Street starts betting on the next leader, it's usually because they already know this one is done. For years, the 25th Amendment was treated like political science fiction, something talked about on cable news panels, not something that would ever happen. But now, it's on the table. And for the first time, the vice president might actually lead it. Let's back up. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment allows the vice president, along with a majority of the cabinet, to declare the president unfit to carry out his duties. If successful, the VP immediately becomes acting president. Until now, this scenario felt impossible. Even when Trump's behavior sparked controversy in the past, his vice presidents, like Mike Pence, refused to publicly challenge him. But JD Vance? He just did. And he didn't do it by accident. His language was precise and intentional. He didn't say, let's fix things together. He said, I'm stepping in. He didn't support Trump's narrative. He called it a mistake, a failure, a suicide pact. That's not disagreement. That's a case being built. And here's where things get dangerous. Insiders say Vance is already counting votes inside the cabinet. Let's take a look. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, humiliated by Trump's vassal tweet, leaning yes. Treasury Secretary, watching the markets burn after Japan's bond collapse, likely yes. Defense Secretary, furious over the military's misuse in the Sarah Jenkins shooting, definite yes. Vance doesn't need to pull the trigger today. All he needs to do is make Trump believe he could. That alone shifts the balance of power. This is what's called a soft coup. No tanks, no sirens, just quiet meetings, legal memos, and shifting loyalties behind closed doors. It's subtle, it's constitutional, and it's very, very real. The mere threat of invoking the 25th is enough to paralyze a presidency. Staff hesitate, agencies stall, everyone starts waiting for the next move, not from Trump, but from Vance. And when the vice president holds the legal keys to remove the president, every word he says becomes a loaded weapon. This isn't fantasy anymore. For years, Donald Trump held a tight grip on the religious right. Evangelicals backed him in record numbers, believing he would protect their values, their churches, and their way of life. But that grip just snapped, and it all started in the basement of a Texas church. The Holy Grace Tabernacle raid was supposed to be a show of strength, a crackdown on illegal immigration. Instead, it turned into a political disaster. Federal agents stormed a church, tear gassed a sanctuary, and sent children screaming into the arms of pastors and parishioners. Images of chaos, cries of terror, crosses in the smoke. For the evangelical base, this wasn't just a policy misstep, it was a moral betrayal. Enter J.D. Vance. He could have dodged the topic. He could have used soft language or pointed fingers at the press. But instead, he did something that cut straight to the heart of the Christian community. He called it what it was, a mistake. You don't use tear gas in a sanctuary. That is not who we are. With that one line, Vance did something Trump never could. He spoke their language, not in terms of politics, not in terms of polling, but in terms of sacred space, in terms of right and wrong. He didn't frame it as a violation of human rights. He framed it as a violation of holy ground. That distinction matters, because now religious voters who once believed Trump was their defender suddenly see a man who let federal agents gas their faith. And they see another man, Hartley, standing in the same administration, who actually seems to understand what that means. Vance, a Catholic convert, knows the importance of symbolism in faith. He knew exactly how to phrase his criticism to draw a line between himself and Trump, without turning the base against the party. He's not just criticizing, he's claiming the moral high ground. And for many conservative Christians, that's enough to begin shifting their loyalty. Because when the president attacks the church and the vice president defends it, it's clear who still has their blessing. If this video made you think, tell us in the comments. Your insights help shape what we cover next. We put real time and research into every episode, so hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, but it keeps this channel alive. Here's the genius of J.D. Vance's move. He didn't just break with Trump. He did it in a way that preserves the movement while isolating the man. Let's be clear, Vance didn't sound like a liberal. He didn't wave a flag for immigrants' rights. He didn't talk about diversity, inclusion, or any of the buzzwords that typically make MAGA voters tune out. Instead, he said something simple, something powerful, and something that hits home for conservative America. You don't use tear gas in a sanctuary. That's it. No lecture, no moral grandstanding, just a clear line rooted in traditional values, not progressive ones. And that's where Vance outmaneuvers Trump completely. While Trump doubled down, calling the pastor a coyote and defending the raid as strong action, Vance spoke like someone who actually understands what middle America believes in. He didn't say the raid was bad because of immigration policy. He said it was bad because it violated sacred space, a church, a sanctuary, a place where government has no right to storm in with weapons drawn. That's conservative framing. That's biblical, and it's politically brilliant because it allows Vance to call out the chaos without abandoning the mission. He's not rejecting the Trump platform, border security, law and order, nationalism. He's saying those things are important, but they must be done with discipline, order, and respect for American values. This is how he threads the needle. He gives Christian conservatives a reason to doubt Trump without asking them to change their identity. He gives law and order Republicans permission to criticize tactics without sounding weak. And he signals to donors and moderates that there's someone in the White House who can speak the language of the base without setting the House on fire. In short, Vance is proving something terrifying for Trump. He doesn't need to destroy MAGA to replace its leader. He can keep the brand, keep the voters, and simply say what millions of Americans are thinking. This message matters. But the messenger, he's lost control. Follow the money. It's one of the oldest rules in politics, and in this case, it leads straight to Silicon Valley. J.D. Vance didn't rise through the Republican ranks on charm alone. He was backed and built by some of the most powerful tech billionaires in America. Most notably, Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal and a key player in shaping the MAGA tech industrial complex. But now, that machine is changing direction. Fast. According to insider sources, Vance recently met with Thiel and Elon Musk in what's being described as a come to Jesus meeting. The message? Trump is no longer an asset. He's a liability. Why? Because Trump's chaos isn't disrupting the system anymore. It's destroying it. The tech elite were happy to ride the MAGA wave when it meant deregulation, tax cuts, and disruption of establishment power. But in 2026, the landscape is different. The Japan bond crash rattled capital markets. The EU's anti-coercion policies threatened to cut off 30% of Silicon Valley's revenue. The Great American Boycott is turning into a full-blown economic revolt. And now, the Holy Grace Church raid has triggered a cultural and PR meltdown. From the billionaire point of view, the Trump presidency has become a flaming dumpster truck heading toward their portfolios. And J.D. Vance? He's their upgrade. A competent, composed version of MAGA, one who can still fight the culture war, but without tanking the stock market in the process. Vance's comments in Ohio weren't just aimed at donors and voters. They were a signal to the tech world. Don't pull out. I'm taking the wheel. And it worked. Within hours of the leak, stock markets stabilized slightly. A subtle but powerful message. The algorithms trust Vance more than Trump. This is more than politics. This is corporate survival. Because once Silicon Valley's power players decide someone is bad for business, they pull the plug. And now they've made their decision. Trump was the prototype. Vance is the product, and they're ready to ship version 2.0, with or without the original salesman. When Trump is cornered, everyone expects the same thing: fire and fury, explosive tweets, rallies, headlines. But this time, his response was a whimper. Just hours after J.D. Vance's brutal takedown leaked, after the vice president publicly called a key operation a mistake and said he was stepping in, Trump finally responded. Not with a press conference, not with a rally, but with a Truth Social post that sounded more like a complaint than a counterattack. J.D. Vance is getting bad advice from globalist donors. He doesn't know the details of the Dallas raid. I am the president, not the donors. That's it. No rage, no threats, no signature Trump punchline. For a man whose political brand was built on dominance, insults, and theatrical defiance, this post was shockingly soft. And that silence speaks volumes. Because Trump's usual playbook, ridicule, mockery, absolute control, only works when he's still seen as the alpha. But now he looks cornered. Why didn't he hit back harder? Because he can't. J.D. Vance isn't a journalist. He's not a critic on cable news. He's the vice president of the United States, and Trump can't fire him. That's the constitutional trap. The one man who just challenged his authority is the one person he legally can't remove, and everyone in Washington knows it. That's why this response wasn't powerful. It was defensive. It was reactive. It was the sound of a man losing control of his own White House, and the political world noticed. Media headlines screamed, "Vance breaks ranks." Donors went silent. Cabinet members started counting votes. And Trump? He was left posting and hoping. For a movement built on strength, that image, a weakened president, publicly contradicted by his VP and barely able to respond, is devastating. Because if Trump can't even control his own vice president, how can he convince the public he's still in charge? For the first time in years, the emperor didn't just get challenged. He looked small. Here's a political truth most people never see. The president gives the orders, but the bureaucracy decides whether they actually happen. And right now, the gears of government are starting to shift away from Trump and toward JD Vance. You won't see it in headlines, you won't hear it shouted at rallies. But inside the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and even the Treasury, something critical is happening. Trump's orders are being slow walked. Why? Because the people inside these institutions, the career staff, the deputy secretaries, the top advisors, can read the writing on the wall. They just heard the leaked Vance audio. They know who's rising and who's collapsing. And in DC, loyalty often follows one thing: power. Think about how this works in real time. Trump issues a fiery executive order. Behind the scenes, staff respond, "We're reviewing it." Weeks pass, nothing happens. Quietly, they wait for Vance to weigh in or to take control. This isn't resistance. It's not sabotage. It's survival. These bureaucrats have been through administrations before. They know when to shift allegiance and when a leader is losing control. Vance, by publicly asserting leadership, is creating what insiders call a shadow presidency. He hasn't taken Trump's job, but departments are starting to treat him like the one who matters. That's how coups happen in modern America. Not with tanks, but with memos, delays, and silence. And when that silence surrounds Trump's desk, he's not the boss anymore. Even worse, the departments Trump relies on most, DOJ, DHS, and Treasury, are the very ones most affected by the backlash from the ICE raid, the economic chaos, and the donor revolt. They're not ignoring Trump because they're rebellious. They're ignoring him because they see a new leader forming in the room next door. Vance didn't just criticize Trump, he triggered a quiet realignment inside the government itself. And once the system stops responding to the president's voice, it's already chosen a new one to follow. For years, the Republican Party has been tied at the hip to Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, he was the movement. The rallies, the headlines, the policies, all roads led back to him. But now, with the walls closing in, the party faces a terrifying question. How do you leave Trump without losing everything he built? The answer? JD Vance. Vance isn't just rebelling, he's offering something far more powerful: a political exit ramp, a way for Republicans to say, "We still believe in the mission, but the man has lost his way." That distinction is everything, because millions of voters still support the ideas Trump championed: border control, trade reform, populism, taking on the elite. What they're tired of is the chaos, the social media rants, the economic instability, the headline disasters like the church raid in Dallas. Vance understands this deeply. That's why his language is so calculated. He's not throwing MAGA in the trash. He's rebranding it. He's saying, "I still stand for the movement, but I stand against madness." This gives Republican voters, lawmakers, and especially donors a safe narrative. They don't have to abandon their past support. They just have to say, "I've evolved. I want the movement to continue, just under better leadership." And let's be honest, with polls crashing, midterms looming, and protests outside the gates, the GOP is desperate for a plan B. Vance is handing it to them on a silver platter. He's young, he's composed, he speaks the base's language, and most importantly, he hasn't burned the party's future with scandal after scandal. This is a classic Machiavellian move. Cut the king loose to save the kingdom, and Vance knows that. His entire approach is built to position himself as the solution, not just to Trump's chaos, but to the party's identity crisis. The GOP doesn't want to destroy MAGA, they want to inherit it, and JD Vance is the one holding the keys to the next chapter, a movement without the madness. And there you have it, the silent coup in real time. JD Vance didn't just speak up, he may have just flipped the future of American politics. But what do you think? Is this bold leadership or a calculated betrayal? Drop your take in the comments. We actually read them. If you haven't seen our last video on the Great American Boycott, go check it out. It connects everything. We pour hours into these deep dives, so if you found this valuable, support us with a quick subscribe. It's just one click, but it means the world to us.